Hello, my name is Wolf, and this is another note from the probability field. Our topic today will be an update on the war in Ukraine. Given the growing awareness of what's occurring on the ground currently in Ukraine, even though we spoke on this topic in an earlier note, I feel some additional attention is required. I recently read an article in the New York Times that draws some of the very same conclusions we considered in our previous discussion on the war. And I want to interject in here right now that I will be referring to a script. There are so many elements and important topics that I want to be sure I don't leave anything out. So let's step back for a second. And from the psychological political personality profile we looked at in our previous discussion, we determined that Mr. Putin is a domineering, controlling, and aggressive personality type with sadistic leanings. He's ambitious, self-serving, exploitative, with narcissistic tendencies and obsessive-compulsive behaviors. He also possesses paranoid tendencies and is inherently distrustful and suspicious and lacks empathy for other people. Mr. Putin sees himself and the Russian state as one and the same, and he has delusions of heroically restoring the grandeur of an imperial Russian empire. Moving to the New York Times article I mentioned, that article is entitled "The Evolution of an Enigma, Tracing Putin's 22-Year Slide from Statesman to Wrathful Dictator." From that article, we have a picture that emerges of a man who seized on almost every move by the West as a slight against Russia, and perhaps also himself. As the grievances mounted piece by piece, year by year, he merged with Russia. Their fates fused in an increasingly messianic vision of a restored imperial glory. Also from that article, the former French ambassador to Moscow from 2017 to 2020, Sylvie Berman, was quoted. She said, "You must understand, he is from the KGB. Lying is not a sin." Also from the article, we have, although Mr. Putin has portrayed a West-leaning Ukraine as a threat to Russian security, it is more immediately a threat to his authoritarian system. The former Polish foreign minister said of Mr. Putin, "He is of course right. A democratic Ukraine integrated with Europe and successful is a mortal threat to Putinism. And that, more than NATO membership, is really the issue." The article continues, "The Russian president, I would say dictator, does not take well to mortal threats, real or imagined. If anyone doubted Putin's ruthlessness, they stood corrected by 2006. His loathing of weakness dictated proclivities for violence." In 2006, just so you know, they're referring to the fact that several journalists and political opponents and rivals and even officials from the regime that were critical of Mr. Putin were eliminated, meaning they were either murdered or imprisoned. Putin's history also includes what was done in Chechnya and Georgia and other regions, including Ukraine in 2014, where Putin deemed them not aligning properly with his dream of an imperial Russia reborn. So he employed the very same playbook he's using today in Ukraine, where he propagated lies, misinformation, and used brutal military tactics to invade and occupy those territories. And some of those territories remain occupied to this day. And now we find ourselves in a repeat of the very same situation. That is, while the Russians say their intent is not to do so, we have Putin's army invading and brutally ransacking a sovereign neighbor under false pretense, with NATO and the US and the international community trying to talk him down. But instead of playing our role in Putin's game as he expects us to, we should be using our knowledge of that very same playbook to our advantage. For over a month, the Ukrainian army, really all the Ukrainian people, have valiantly resisted the Russian invaders. President Biden, U.S. diplomats, French President Macron, the German and Polish officials, NATO representatives, Ukrainian diplomats, all kinds of people have met and talked with Putin and the Russian so-called negotiators, attempting to arrive at a peace agreement. The Russians, for their part, they let us talk, but they bargain in bad faith. They tell us lies. They spew misinformation to the world and to their own people, all the while expanding their war effort on the ground in Ukraine. At this point, the Ukrainian people, against all odds, have fought the invading Russian army to a standstill. And we see the Russian forces withdrawing now from north central and western Ukraine, but obviously not to end the war. They are pulling back, as we can see, to regroup and resupply before what appears a return into the east and south of Ukraine to continue prosecuting this war. But this withdrawal has allowed us an opportunity to see further evidence beyond the purposeful targeting of hospitals, residential areas, and civilian shelters and infrastructure. We see evidence of Putin's true intent of violent genocide and war crimes against the Ukrainian people. We see whole villages devastated. We have mass graves with hundreds of bodies, and bodies in the streets, some with signs of torture and rape. So during this slight pause, though Russia is still firing missiles and shelling Ukrainian cities and now farms as well, before they renew their ground assault, we need to take this time and use it constructively, not just rinse and repeat, because the Russians will go back to claiming the Ukraine needs denazification and liberation. The Ukrainians will continue begging us for weapons and other support. We'll go on voicing support and sending aid, and many entities will attempt negotiating with the Russians while they continue to lie, and the death and destruction will just escalate. It'll mount up if we just go through this same pattern over again. And while this exercise of insanity goes on, we have people like retired General David Petraeus, now at the ICCS Institute of Conflict, Cooperation and Security, saying that he thinks eventually a negotiated settlement is possible if, and I quote, as we hope he, Putin, will be sufficiently weakened, if not chastened, by the fighting in Ukraine. And we also have the NATO secretary and other diplomats telling us we must be prepared for this war to be a protracted situation. It will last for at least months, if not years, repeating that cycle over and over again, while we wait for sanctions to take effect and avoid a tactical solution on the battlefield, because we don't want to provoke a more extreme response from Moscow. You have to be freaking kidding me. I mean, what is more extreme than genocide? I will have to repeat, they're purposely attacking hospitals, schools, residential areas, as well as targeting civilians. They're torturing and raping and brutally murdering hundreds, possibly thousands of non-combatant men, women, and children, along with the total destruction of the country's infrastructure. Is that not extreme? Not extreme enough? I mean, I get it. We have to talk. I can't say negotiate anymore because we're not really negotiating. Negotiations require that all the parties involved are trying to come to some equitable agreement, and that is not happening. So we talk, and the Russians lie to us, but we talk to them because they are a nuclear-armed state. And then, of course, there are economic considerations. But it is time to wake the F up, people. I mean, really. We got to break out of the trance, take your eyes off the gold, pull the money out of your ears, and listen to what's really happening on the ground. We are at a tipping point. You can't buy your way out and you can't talk your way out. This is it. We are at the edge. So, what do we know? What can we do? Number one, we know from past behaviors and statements then and now, Putin has absolutely no intention of reaching any sort of so-called peace until he already has what he wants. And he will take what he wants by any means necessary, even if he has to commit war crimes and genocide to do it. And why should he not? No one has ever stopped him from doing it before. Chatting him up and shuffling some money around are an annoyance to Putin, but they're not a deterrent. So he will go forward. Putin does not want peace. He wants power and he wants control. Number two, the nukes. I don't think Putin will use nuclear weapons. Why would he not use nuclear weapons? Because that would destroy everything he's trying to achieve in terms of territory and resources. And you cannot be the vaunted hero that has restored the Russian Empire to its imperial glory if everyone in the world, including you, is dead. I could be wrong, but that scenario seems a bit of a red herring. But he does wield that threat as a weapon because it works. It invokes a powerful and paralyzing fear reaction. And then there's the economy. Number three. This is a vast, many-layered topic, so we'll just hit some of the close-up pain points, and hopefully we'll get a chance to go deeper in a future note. So, what will this war cost in treasure and blood? Notice I put treasure first, because for most people, that's what they're concerned about, is how much is this war going to impact their prices at the pump, their prices at the grocery store, how much will natural gas increase in price for power and heat? Will they have to spend chilly nights in their warm beds, or will there be rolling blackouts? Your morning coffee, lunch, dinner, groceries, they all may cost $1 or $2 more. Also, your investment portfolio, the values may fluctuate. So those are the types of concerns for most people. The cost comes down to just spending a little more treasure. No blood. But I have to note that, as this will generally be the case for most people in developed countries, not all, but most, because Ukraine supplies 30% of the world's grain at the third world level, these costs will be felt in the stomach. There'll be pangs of hunger. As for Mr. Putin, he sees democracy as an existential threat to himself and to the Russian Empire he wishes to resurrect. So to him, it does not matter what it costs in treasure or blood, especially the blood of his enemies. And any expended treasure, that can be extracted from those who are conquered. But for the Ukrainian people, and for the Russian conscripts that are out in the field fighting Mr. Putin's war for him, the balance sheet is soaked in blood, and it's on fire. So these three things alone should be enough to serve as a call to action. But there are some other impacts that inform us that the need for action is urgent, and it needs to be immediate and decisive. We need to acknowledge that there are currently at least 7 other wars occurring in the world as we speak. And several are just as cruel and violent and destructive as this one. But it seems this war in Ukraine has become the lens through which we can see just how close to the edges we are. On one edge, this war plus all the other wars are generating and dispersing obscene levels of toxic contaminants into the air, into the water, into the earth. And they are impacting the global environment in negative ways, some of which we don't even know. At the same time, they are consuming vast amounts of resources, elemental, economic, and human, as well as our attention, all of which needs to be laser focused right now at this critical juncture on keeping our planet livable before it's too late. In the end, no one really wins a war. At the other edge, Ukraine is fighting for all of us who believe in the principles of democracy. Democracy is under pressure, not just in Ukraine, but worldwide. According to the recently released EIU 2021 Democracy Index report, only 45.7% of the world's population lives in a democracy of some sort. That's a decline of 4.3% from the prior year, and only 6.4% are living in a full democracy. By comparison, 37.1% of people live under authoritarian rule, and 17% under hybrid regimes. If you do not think that democratic forms of government are under threat, then look around you. Not only at Putin's obvious attempt to destroy democracy in Ukraine, there is the rise of the ultra-right wing in Europe. There are manipulated elections in Central and South America. And in the U.S., there is a decided autocratic lean by factions of the Republican Party, who, under the guise of saying they are protecting our freedoms, are actually acting to limit voting rights and block access to health care for targeted groups of people. And in schools, they want to suppress free speech and control what is taught in the classrooms to fit their agenda. They also want to remove books from libraries and ban books. There are 5 qualities that define a democracy: electoral process and pluralism, functioning of government, political participation, political culture, and civil liberties. If we do not act decisively to end this war in Ukraine now, we will be as culpable as Mr. Putin for the genocidal war crimes that will destroy the people and culture of Ukraine, and for the further aggressions that are sure to follow. I encourage everyone to take to heart these words. Governments are instituted among people, deriving just powers from the consent of the governed. And speak up, speak out, talk to your friends, let all your elected representatives and President Biden know how you feel. I sent my last video to my senators and to the White House, and I'll send this one. Use your voice. People are not mind readers. They won't know what you feel or what you think unless you tell them. If each of us acts, together we can make change happen. You're welcome to post links or copy this video, whatever you want to do with it. And thanks for listening. We'll talk again.